let's get a little bit more technical. Now, obviously my baits, let's talk about pegging for a minute. I have bobber stops and I have the T-stops. T-stops, I'm going to show you, is basically just a piece of rubber here that you can stick inside the cavity of your sinker. This is a T-stop. This is one way of pegging your sinker. Now, one thing that I noticed, you can use these guys for pegging your sinkers. You just stick it in, pull it through, and then you just cut off the excess area, the excess. I'll show you that here in a second. But one thing you're really gonna need to take care of, especially when you're using elastic plastic like what I'm using here, is you want to keep this bait from, when you set the hook, you want to keep the bait from coming down on the hook, because it can ball up and foul up and miss a couple fish strikes because of it. Here's what I do to alleviate that. I actually use the T-stop not only to stop my sinkers from sliding up and down my line, but I also use them to help keep my baits on. What you're going to do with your T-stop here, you're going to insert it inside the line tie. All right, you just insert it inside the line tie just like that. All right, see how that looks? And then what I want to do is I'm going to cut off the excess about, I don't know, give yourself maybe an 1/8 inch. What you're doing is you're creating something for that plastic to bind up into. So I'll cut it off on both sides about an 1/8 inch, just like that. So now this is what it looks like. You see, I've got a little bit on both sides. And what I'll do, take a little bit of super glue. Super glue in here. I use super glue for elastic all the time because it keeps the bait from sliding down on the hook. On a straight shank hook with elastic, you're going to fight keeping that bait up on the hook when you're fishing around in grass, and this alleviates all of that problem. What you want to do is just put a little bit of super glue on both ends of that barb, that basically barb that you made. And what you do is slide up your plastic up and over that little T-stop. Now what you've created, you've made that plastic is not only held by the barb on the hook, but you've got something that's grabbing that plastic in 3 positions up here on the head, and it will not come down. So what it does is ensures when you bury that plastic into bury the hook into the plastic, it ensures that this is not going to slide down the shaft of the hook, ball up around the hook point, and make you miss a strike. Every time, I don't care how big the fish is, once that elastic dries around that T-stop with super glue, it ain't ever coming off, good buddy. That ain't gonna ever be off. So that prevents it from sliding down, balling around, and making you miss a strike. And it ensures that every time one grabs it, that hook point pops through right just like that, and you catch the fish. So that's just a little advanced tip to help you with the elastic. Use those T-stops and a little bit of super glue. If you use just super glue, over time, that's basically, it's still going to kind of loosen and it will come down off the hook. But use a T-stop so that plastic has something to grab onto, and when you set the hook, you don't have to worry about that plastic coming down and fouling up your bait. So basically, as far as baits goes, when you're talking about a Texas rig, man, it's unlimited. When you go to the soft plastic aisle in your tackle store, there is not a bait or bait style that you cannot rig Texas rig. Any and all baits can be rigged Texas style, from swim baits to stick baits to creature baits. Now the 2 favorite that I have here, obviously you just saw the palmetto bugs. That's a great creature bait to flip around, especially in the springtime of the year. Now the other one that I go to grab, pretty much, you know, these are the first 2 that I go to grab when I go to Texas rig. The other one is a bang stick. Now this guy was actually meant to be a Nico bait, but it's a really good bait to flip around a structure. It's a 6 3/4 inch stick bait, but it's got the little tentacles on the tail here that gives it sort of like an action that I don't think fish normally see in that depth zone. So I use him as well. Now I like this guy. You can see I got it rigged on an offset hook just like this, and I'm going to rig it the same way. This is 20-pound test, favorite rush here. A little bit more affordable setup here. 20-pound test fluorocarbon, and I think this reel is actually a Lew's Tournament Pro 7.5 to 1 gear ratio reel. I just would suggest that you use the fastest reel you have in your, in your rod locker. You don't have to have, I've got an 8.3 to 1 on the other reel. You want to use your fast reel because it's just going to work for you when you're talking about a Texas rig. So I'm going to spool this guy up here. As I mentioned, keep in mind a Texas rig, it encompasses a lot of different style baits and techniques, and you can use it from flipping to casting to fishing deep, fishing shallow. There's really not much you cannot do with the Texas rig. Now, in addition to using that T-stop to hold your plastics on your hook, you can also use the T-stop for, which is what it's kind of originally designed for, what we use it for in bass fishing. You can also use those guys for a sinker stop is what I was trying to say. Again, I use just a regular Palomar knot as a connecting knot to my line tie. Really easy knot to tie. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy, now you can also take your T-stop. This is how you use the T-stop to stop your sinker. And I've actually grown to where I prefer the T-stop over the bobber stops. Of course, the bobber stop is a more modern way to do it, but I've found that there's definitely some benefits in using a T-stop over the bobber stop. You see, basically you just stick it in. You can stick it either way. I typically stick it in the top and let the small end come out the top, like the small end come out of the bottom like that. So you take it and stick it right beside the line, and what you're going to do, take your tag end of T-stop, cut that top off, and then you're going to cut the bottom end of your T-stop off. Okay, so that binds against the line and it keeps your sinker from coming off when you're pitching around. Well, all it does is make it more efficient so they don't separate. When you go to flipping grass, they don't separate and your bait goes to the bottom with your sinker. That's the only reason it's there. Good thing about the T-stop, when you go to set the hook, what happens is the weight slings up your line like that and it stays there. It doesn't come back down and hit your knot or hit your bait and push your bait out of the fish's mouth like a bobber stop does. So a little bit about using a T-stop to stop your sinker.